10-second introduction. This is an excerpt from an hour and 11-minute video where I debunk every pro-choice argument. That's linked in this description. If you don't want to watch the entire video, there are time cards to all 31 different arguments in that video's description. Here we go. The pro-life argument boiled down to just a couple of minutes. I was pro-life long before I was ever religious. I don't find the religious arguments for the pro-life position anywhere near as strong as the scientific and logical ones, and that's what I'll be presenting here. First, let's go ahead and lay out just a couple of scientific facts. First off, life has a beginning point. There is a point at which life begins, and we have to decide where that is. I had a person on my TikTok page recently say, well, it's useless to try to define that. And I had to ask them, what do you think biology is? Right? It's the study of life, and there's no way to study life unless you have some way of defining what life is. And as soon as you define what life is, then that immediately gives you a starting point. Anything that fits the categories or meets the qualifications for life is alive, and anything that does not fit those qualifications is not alive. It's pretty simple. It's not that complicated. So let me start with this simple fact. 95% of biologists, and I'm going to say right now for the skeptics who are like, well, he's not going to say this. I am. 85% of biologists are pro-choice. 85% of biologists are pro-choice. They support abortion, at least to a certain degree, okay? So they are not in any way ideologically biased towards what I'm about to tell you. 95% of them, pro-choice, pro-life, all included, 5,000 were surveyed, 95 agreed, came to the consensus that human life begins at fertilization. That's a scientific fact. If you read any book on embryology, they will say exactly that. Now, I'm not trying to appeal to authority. I'm actually going to explain what the qualifications for life are here in just a second. But I just want you, before you hear that part, I don't want you to hear it with an overly skeptical lens. I don't want you to go, oh, well, I can probably try to find some little way to refute that. The biologists, the pro-choice biologists, would disagree with you if you were to say that life did not begin at fertilization. That is the beginning point. We have to grapple with that. Then the question is, at what point do you get moral value, moral worth? Okay, so let's go ahead and cover, now that we've established that they believe that life begins at fertilization, why is that? Let's talk about the qualifications for life. So if you simply look up a textbook, which very few people will actually do, or you just Google it. I mean, you're literally on the internet right now. You can just pull up another tab and just look up the characteristics of life or qualifications for life. And don't look up one website. Look up 5, 6, 10, and you'll find slight derivations. But when you look up the definitions of the qualifications, what you will find is that they all basically agree on the same general qualifications. You'll find that they're made, for something to be alive, it has to be made up of cells. Every living thing that we know of is made of cells. Doesn't have to be. That's all we know of so far. It passes traits on to its offspring. That doesn't necessarily mean you reproduce, meaning have a kid. It just means that you have the potential to, that your cells, when your cells replicate, they pass on their traits. It has metabolism. It consumes. It uses energy. It absorbs energy and uses it. It grows and it changes over time. It responds to its environment. Okay. Now, every one of those characteristics is found in the earliest stages of development. The zygote. The human zygote, the first moment of fertilization, every single one of those characteristics is met. So the first scientific fact simply is this, is that human life begins at fertilization. You may be with the 85% of biologists who say, yes, that's true, but they don't have moral worth. Okay, we'll start there. But we have to at least admit scientifically there's no and if, ors, or buts about it. That's when your life began. The second scientific fact that we have to wrestle with, that we have to absorb and then fit into our moral framework, is the fact that abortion ends a human life, which I'll use the word for that as killing. Now, I'm going to do my absolute best to avoid the word murder. Murder is a moral term, and because of that, it carries with it certain connotations that include certain levels of guilt, certain levels of culpability, certain levels of in legal terms, they call it the mens rea, which is how guilty your mind is. So there's some level of intentionality, right? We separate out manslaughter versus negligent death versus murder. And so I want to take all those categories out of it. I want to just use the scientific term, okay? We're killing, meaning ending a life. Something's alive, it's no longer alive because of our action, we killed it. Fair enough. So life begins at fertilization and abortion kills human life. Now, I'm going to bring into the discussion a moral axiom, which I think is ubiquitous. It is it's baked into the founding of this very nation, and I think that most people would have an intuitive agreement with it. You may have a different justification for why you agree with it, but most of us would agree with this moral axiom. Okay, it is wrong to intentionally kill human beings without sufficient moral justification. So that leads us to our logical syllogism. Now, this is a deductive argument. Now, why is that important? In a deductive argument, if the logic is valid and if the two premises are true, then the conclusion is inescapable. It doesn't matter how much you hate it. It doesn't matter how much you disagree with it. You are wrong if the logic is valid and the premises are true. So what I'm about to present here is this syllogism. In order to disagree with the conclusion, which if you're pro-choice, you will want to, what you're going to have to do is disprove either the first or the second premise. So here we go. Premise number one, it is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings without morally justifying reasons. Number two, abortions end an innocent human life, and almost none of them have sufficient justification. And number three, therefore, almost all abortions are wrong. Now, why do I add in without sufficient moral justification? Because there are times when humans do kill innocents and it does seem to be justified. The famous trolley car example, right? The train is going down the tracks. It's going to hit 10 men. If you flip the switch, it'll go down. It'll hit one man, but it'll save 10, right? And so at least in that sort of situation, most people have the intuition that saving the 10 at the expense of the one seems to be justified. So what would be some situations in which abortion could be morally justified? Because I didn't say none of them are justified. I said that at least most of them are not. I think if a doctor could prove that without abortion, the mother would certainly die, then in that instance, there's at least some argument for abortion. Now, if you're Catholic, certainly if you're a Thomist, then you would actually go a different route. You would say it's not abortion. You would elect some sort of procedure that would save the mother's life, but may result by the law of double effect in the death of the child. I'm not sure if I want to go all the way towards that specific theory on morality. It may be that a safer way to actually protect the mother is through something like an abortion. I'm not certain there. But here's what I am certain of. The life of the mother is cited as the primary reason for only between 0.3, so it's a third of 1%, all the way up to 1% of all abortions. What that means is that between 99.7 and just 99% of all abortions have nothing to do with the life of the mother. A full 25% of women say the primary reason that they have an abortion is just because it doesn't seem like it's the right time for them. When they take these surveys, women normally give more than one answer. The most commonly cited answer among 75% of women is that it would interfere with things like school or their career or their family. Another 73 say things like it would impair them financially, which actually includes planning for college, which seems a lot like the first option. And almost 40% of women get abortions because they're done having kids. So the first premise, that it's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being without sufficient justification, seems to me undeniable. The second, that abortion ends an innocent life, is scientifically undeniable. The second half of our second premise is that almost none are justified, I think is also undeniable given the stats I just cited. So therefore, almost all abortions are wrong. Now, from here going forward, as we jump into our pro-choice arguments, what you have to ask every time is, does it refute the first premise? Does it refute the second premise? Or does it show that my logic is invalid? Now, I think you'll find my logic is not flawed, meaning that the conclusion does follow from the two premises. Therefore, the only hope that these pro-choice arguments, the 31 that we're going through, the only hope they have of refuting the case I just put forward is that they would somehow disprove my first premise or my second premise. I'm Ryan Martin. This is Unsafe Media, where I help you respond with wisdom and virtue to the ideas and movements that are shaping our age. If you want to support this work, it's all listener supported. So if you want to support us one time, it's on Venmo or ongoing on Patreon. Just check the link tree down in the description. Otherwise, check out these other videos, like, subscribe, share, all the other stuff that everybody tells you to do. I'll see you next time.